Welcome back to my introductory series to Blender. You've made it over to episode 2.5 of the modeling process. In this video, we'll be ramping up our speed in which we're creating our objects for our scene here, and once we're done with this, we'll move on to the texturing workflow in episode 3. So let's just get straight into it.
Smooth sculpts.
So we've got our barrels here, our floorboards, our walls, and our bricks. And now that we have a kind of basic knowledge of how to create stuff here, we're going to ramp it up a bit in speed and get the rest of the scene built out fairly quickly. So keep up with me if you can. I'm going to walk you through it step by step anyway, but we're just going to be going a little bit quicker. So I'm going to add in a cube here. I'm going to move it across over to the corner here, and we're just going to scale it up. So scale, so S to scale, Y to pull it across. And we've got a little chest-like shape. Cool. So let's jump into edit mode by pressing tab. Go to the edge select mode with 2, and we're just going to select these 2 edges on top. And the reason being is now that if we bevel it, we're going to see we get this cool little chest-like look to it. If we scroll up, we can give it more loop cuts, and it's going to look more like a chest. So let's go like that. That looks pretty good. And now I'm going to go to face select these 2 faces. We're going to inset these 2. So I to inset, pull it in a bit, and then we'll extrude along normals. So Alt-E, extrude along normals. And again, you can hold down Shift if it's going too quickly for you to get some more precise control. And now we've got this cool little pop out thing here. So what I'm going to do again is just Control-B to give it that beveled look. Awesome. So now we kind of want to make those straps along the top here. So that's a pretty easy thing to do. You just hit Control-R, scroll up to get 2 little loop cuts, right click to center in the position, and now we can scale it along the Y axis. And we're just going to do that again essentially. So Control-R, 2 loop cuts, and then scale it on the Y axis. And now if we go to face select mode, we've got this kind of cool thing that we can extrude out and make straps with. So Alt-E, extrude faces along normals. Now we've got 2 straps, which is pretty awesome. I think though I do want to move them a little bit closer to the edge here. So I'm going to press Control and then plus on the numpad, and you'll see that's expanded the selection. So if I Control-Z and do that again, so Control plus, we do it multiple times, you can select everything. You can also do Control minus. But it's just a really quick way to essentially like select more things. So Control plus to select these 2 bands. And what I'm going to do is just press S and scale them again on the Y axis to be a little bit closer to the edge. So that's looking pretty cool. Now I'm just going to bevel it. So to bevel the edges here that we have, I'm just selecting these 2 loops on the edge here as well as these ones. So Control Shift click, and that'll select the whole loop for you. And now we just have to bevel it. So Control-B, pull that into something that looks okay. That looks pretty good to me. And now we can move on to making the little lock pad at the front here. So to do so, it's just as simple as insetting this to something manageable. So that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to scale it on the Y axis. So SY to make it kind of like lock pad-y looking. And I think that looks pretty good to me. So from here, we're just going to extrude it. So E, pull it out if you can. Oops. There we go. And that looks okay. And now we're just going to bevel it. So Control-B, pull that in. And I think I might give this one a little more resolution. So just scrolling up on the mouse pad. And there we go. We've got a lock pad. So that's pretty much the basics of the chest. We'll get onto texturing it so that this is metal and the sides and the padlock are metal, but that's in a future video. So now let's move on to maybe making the table here in the corner. Again, Shift-A, cube, pull that over to the corner, and let's just get straight into creating this thing. So tap into edit mode, numpad, period key if it's got weird rotation, and we're just going to scale this into kind of a table looking shape. Alright, so I mean that looks pretty good for the tabletop, and now we pretty much just need to make the legs and we're good to go. So again, to do that, Control-R to create a loop cut, we want to make probably 2 on this side, so we can confirm that. And then we'll scale them out to the edge. So S, X, boom, and then we've got some loop cuts there on the edge. We'll do it the same on this axis as well. So S, Y, scale it over there. And now we have these little squares that we can extrude downwards to create legs, essentially. So what I'm going to do is pull this up in object mode so that I can look under it. Go back into edit mode with tab, and I'm just going to select each and every one of these 4 squares. E and then Z to pull down, and now we've got a little kind of table here. So we want to make this a little more stylized. We can come over here to the face select mode, and we can essentially just bevel at the edges. So I'm going to grab edge select mode, in fact, and just select each side of this and bevel it out. So Control Shift click to select all of those, Control B, and now it's looking more aesthetically pleasing. So for the legs, I do want to give it that kind of low poly chipped look like these bricks. So to do so, I'm going to go to 1 on my keypad and get these vertex selections. And I essentially just want to do some beveling of the vertex. So Control B and then V. And now we can get these cool looking little chips in the wood. So I'm going to do that for a couple of these. So maybe down here, give a chip up there. Over on this side, Control B, V. Pull it across. And I mean, at this point, it's really up to you how far you want to take this. You can see it kind of broke here, so I might just undo that. But it's, you don't have to go overboard with this. You can just be kind of subtle. But I think that will about do me for that process. I think that'll look pretty okay. And again, if you want to give it some like super low poly details, you can add a modifier again. So in the wrench icon, click on add modifier and then decimate. And then you can play with the ratio here, and you can see it's like cutting it up and making it super low poly. So if you want to go that route, feel free. Okay, so now let's move on to making the chair. So again, Shift A, Mesh, Cube, and let's just start fleshing out the chair look. So I've tabbed into edit mode, scaling it down, and I want to create essentially what we did with the table. So we'll make 2 loop cuts here, scale it out to the edge, and then I'll also make 2 more loop cuts on this side, and scale it out again to the edge to make those 4 little corners that we can extrude down as legs. So I'm just going to tab back into edit mode, bring it up so I can look underneath because of the way the floor is faced. I'm going to go to face select mode, just select each one of these 4 faces and extrude them down on the Z axis. Awesome. So we've got essentially like a stool right now, which is, it's okay, but we want to create that back face. So let's grab these 3 dudes here and extrude them up. So E, Z, and I mean, it's super basic obviously, but it gets the job done. So I'm going to give it, again, another little extrude here on top and bevel that. Maybe give it a little bit more resolution. Cool. So we've got like a very basic chair. But what I want to do as well is create kind of like a little cushion here. So using the same geometry, I'm not going to add anything. I'm just going to create a loop cut, pull that back, and I'll also do it for the top here as well. So down to the bottom. I might even just Control Z and do 2 loop cuts here. And I'm just going to scale it so that it's kind of like this and even. And that way, when I come here to face select and select these 2 faces, I can inset them a little bit, and then we can extrude them and create those cushions. But what I'll do is press Alt-E to extrude the faces along the normals. That way it's even and there's no weird like glitches happening like you saw before. So that seems pretty good. I'll just Control B to bevel that. Give it a little bit of that cushiony feel. And I mean, that looks pretty good. So we've got a chair now. Awesome. So we can move this across wherever we want. I think in the final render I had it something like this. kind of like setting up a little story. Maybe the dude's ran off and he's left his chair all scuffed up. But let's just go ahead and make the map that he has there on the table. This one's really easy, and it actually introduces a new kind of style to modeling, so this will be fun to do. So I'm just going to place it on the table as close as I can and jump into edit mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and subdivide. So subdivisions, essentially it gives it more faces and geometry to play with. And once you do press anywhere after you subdivide, you're not going to be able to create any more, and you'll have to go back and do it again multiple times. So if you press Ctrl Z and do it again, you'll see this little menu down here has come up, and you can actually decide how many you want, which is super handy. So I'm just going to say let's go with 4. That's more than enough. I'll click to confirm that, and now we can move on to the cool part of this modeling for the map. So what I'm going to do is go to 1 and select a vertex, and before I press G to grab it, I'm going to press the O button. And what this is going to allow me to do is, as you can see, it's the proportional editing hotkey. So it's essentially whatever's inside this big circle, you can zoom in and out with the scrolly wheel and create it bigger or smaller. And it's going to affect each vertex in that circle. So this is going to help us get those like crinkly cut pieces on the paper. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hide this chair, go into the side view mode, and with my map selected, I'm going to just create that kind of crinkled map feel. So I'm just rotating and making it look like a kind of like a scrunched up map. So I'll do this for both sides. And you just want to make it feel like a map, essentially. So sometimes if you don't want to do it to all vertexes, you can just press O and change the proportional editing to be on or off. But for now, this is looking okay, I think. So we've got like a scrunched up, rolled up map. But I think I want to have a little more segments applied to it. So I'll go back to the side view by pressing 1. And what we can do is just E to extrude, and we can create our own little extra vertices for us to play with. So now if we go out of edit mode, it kind of looks like a map. It's like a piece of paper that's curling in on itself. But I want to give it some more asymmetry. So super easy again, you just go back into edit mode, press O to go into proportional editing, and then we can essentially just move the vertices around until something looks to our liking. So I think something like this looks pretty okay. So I'm happy with that. And what I'll do is I'm just going to place it on the table in an interesting way. So I think this is like something what it was looking like in the final render. So I'll keep it as this for now. And in the texturing part of this course, we'll go through how to actually apply an image texture of an actual map to make it look really cool. But for now, let's go on to making the sword. So Shift A, Mesh, Cube, and you guessed it, into the tab mode. And we're just going to start fleshing out this sword look. You probably want to turn off proportional editing now. So O to turn it off, on and off. You can also do it up here with this button. And now let's just make something that resembles a dagger. So going into face select mode, I'm going to grab this face here and extrude it out, scale it in, then I'm going to extrude it out again, and then one more time and scale this up. So now we've got kind of like a little hilt to our sword. It's pretty cool. So I'm going to press this face here and press Ctrl Plus to create, to expand my selection. And then I'm just going to scale it in a bit so that it's a little more hilt-like, because it was too big before. It was like really chunky. And now it's just a matter of creating that sword, that little dagger that we have. So if we press I to inset, we can pull this in a bit, and then we can extrude it out and essentially just bring it all the way out until whatever length we want, and then we can start scaling it in to make that sword kind of look. So that looks okay for a dagger, but I kind of want to add in a loop cut somewhere down here so that I can scale it out and make it more of a sword. So that looks pretty okay for now. I think we'll stick with that. And even here, just at the hilt, I'm going to control click this so that I can bring it forward a bit so that it's not so jarring and sharp. And there we have it. We have a very basic sword. So I think to finish off the sword, let's just select the edges and bevel them and hopefully make it look a little more less jarring and a little bit nicer. So Control B to bevel, and there we go. We've got a cool looking sword. So I'm just going to scale it down and place it somewhere on the table, like so. And then I'll just rotate it around till something that looks okay, maybe this way. And I mean, that looks pretty okay to me. I think the last thing I might do is make this edge here a bit, a little bit more, tapered. So just like that. So what I did there is I just went Alt Z to go into wireframe mode, select everything at the top, and I just scaled it in. Cool. So there we go. We've got a sword. We've got pretty much everything I think that was in the scene. The last two things that we need to add here now are those torches on the walls. So let's start doing that. So let's go mesh, Shift A, mesh, cube, bring this guy up, and we're just going to make that little kind of stand that was holding that flame. So I'm going to go to edit mode, scale this in a bit, and let's just start making some cool adjustments to this. So I think we want to make the thing that attaches to the wall. So I'm going to inset this side, that in, extrude it out, and I might just extrude it again and then scale it. And that's a very basic kind of hilt attachment to the wall. And we're just going to do kind of the same thing up top here. So E to scale it up, E, scale it up again, and then here, inset this, E to scale it out, E to extrude it again, scale it up a bit, and there we go. We've got a very basic attachment to the wall for our flame to be attached to. But I do want to give it a little bit more detail. So back into edit mode, let's give the attachments here a bit more length. So I'm just grabbing it and pulling it out. And then the actual hilt here, the kind of stick that's holding it, I'm going to give it a loop cut. Alt Z so I can look at the object a bit better. And now I just want to start scaling it in so that it's got a kind of cup on top. So I've scaled that in. I'll also do that for this here. So scale this in. It's looking good. I might add another loop cut here. And right now, it's really just up to your preference on how you want to stylize this thing. So maybe I'm going to give it a little bit of a crooked edge just by putting in a loop cut and dragging it across, giving it some asymmetry. And I mean, that looks pretty cool. But I think for the top here, if we go to face select, I'm just going to click the top face. I'm going to inset this a bit, and I'm going to pull that down. So G, and then Z. And now we can bevel this edge so it looks less sharp. So into edge select mode with 2 on the numpad, control click the edge, and then B, control B, sorry, to bevel. Looks like it hasn't caught this edge here, so I'm just going to shift click that, control B, and there we go. We've got a cool little cup thingy that can hold our flame, which is pretty cool. But I'm just looking at the handles here that are attached to it, and they're looking really pretty average. So I'm just going to add some more loop cuts in. Oops. Tab, Control R, chuck in some loop cuts. And I think something like this should do. So I'll do that again on the bottom, Control R, chuck in these 2, scale it in a bit, SX to scale on the X-axis, And I might even give these guys some kind of asymmetry, so I'll pull this one to the left and this one to the right, and then the one on top here, I'll pull this to the left and then this one to the right, and that's looking pretty cool. Alright, so now we can essentially line this up with the wall wherever we please. I think somewhere like this will do. And then we just want to Shift D to duplicate it, like so. Right click to snap back to where it was, and then we can start moving it across. So I'm just going to rotate it on the Z axis, -90 degrees. Pull it across. And it doesn't have to be like exactly mirrored to this guy, but that looks pretty good to me. So we'll leave that as is for now. And we're on to the final object, which is the flame. So this one's actually pretty fun to make. It's going to be using this object here, the icosphere. So Shift A, Mesh, Icosphere. And this one's pretty cool because it comes with a lot of little vertex points that you can play with. So if you remember with the map here, we're going to be using the proportional editing kind of workflow. So O to jump into proportional editing, G to grab, and then we can scale it in and out as we please. So we basically just want to make a kind of flamey look to this object. So I believe in what my final render, I pulled it up here on this side, pulled one of these vertexes up as well, and that, I mean, that's pretty much the extent of it. It looks pretty flame-like, very low poly flame, but feel free to play around with maybe the backside of it. Do whatever you feel is necessary and what is your kind of stylization choice. This is looking pretty okay for now. Just gonna make some final adjustments, maybe squash in the sides. And yeah, I think that'll do. So what we can do now is scale it down and just essentially plop it on top of the object here, like so. And now we've got a little flame. Depending on your camera view, once we set up our camera, you can rotate it to look more aesthetically pleasing. But for now, let's just duplicate this across to here. So right click to snap it back to where it was, and I'm just going to move it across the axes by snapping it. There we go. And that is pretty much everything we need to do for the modeling process. The final things that we can do for the flame, if we really want to, if you go into edit mode again, you can actually add in another object in edit mode, and it'll apply to the same object you're working on. So if we add in another icosphere, bring this across, and just make like a little flame that is kind of like sparking off of the initial flame, it's going to give it some really cool aesthetic. So if I scale this down and then make it sort of like a little drop of fire that's sort of an ember coming off of the flame here, and then rotate that a bit, that's going to look pretty cool in the final render. So I'll duplicate a couple of these, scale them down on different axes, and that is essentially everything we need to run through for the modeling process. So for now, I'll finish up the little embers here, and you can follow along or you can jump onto the next video. But for now, we're going to move on to the texturing workflow and get this scene looking really cool. Alright guys, that's the end of this video. If you click on screen now, you'll be sent through to episode 3, where we'll begin the texturing process in Blender and begin putting those final touches on our scene. I'll see you over there.